You're only 12 years old, and the concept of your body being your own has yet to fully dawn on you. It's the year 1443 AD, and you stand in the grand hall of Bleo Castle, observing men draped in fine velvet and fur as they deliberate on your future. You are nothing more than a pawn in their game. Your name is Margaret Buffett. Though noble blood runs through your veins, you soon learn that being born female in a male-dominated world means your bloodline is irrelevant, and you are merely an asset to be traded. The rushes beneath your feet smell of mint and rosemary, freshly scattered that morning to mask the dampness seeping from the stone walls. The air is heavy, and candlelight flickers, casting shadows over the faces of lords and bishops speaking in low, urgent tones. Their breath forms clouds in the chill that fills the room. You tighten your woolen cloak around you, though the shiver you feel has nothing to do with the cold. Your guardian, William Deppel, Duke of Suffolk, gestures toward you with his ringed hand which catches the light of the fire. "The girl brings considerable holdings," he announces, his voice commanding, dripping with the assurance of a man who has never doubted his right to control the lives of others. "Her inheritance includes lands in Somerset, Devon and Dorset. A marriage alliance will secure these lands for our cause." You want to ask what cause he refers to, but at 12, girls do not speak when powerful men are talking. Instead, you focus on John Deppol, Suffolk's son, who is set to become your husband by the end of the month. At 14, he's still awkward and gangly, his hands too big for his wrists. He steals a quick glance at you before quickly turning his eyes away, as though embarrassed by your presence. He dives back into the conversation, far removed from the reality of what's happening. Before we move forward, hit that like button and subscribe if you're fascinated by these hidden stories from history. And don't forget to comment below to share where you're tuning in from. It's incredible that we're connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. Margaret Buffett was born into a world in 1443 AD where her very existence was both a blessing and a curse. As the daughter and sole heir of John Bowett, Duke of Somerset, her bloodline carried a claim to the English throne that would shape every aspect of her life. The Buffett family descended from John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster, and his mistress Catherine Swynford, whose love affair had been legitimised by marriage and royal decree. Yet the shadow of bastard blood clung to their descendants, a stain that would never fully fade. When Margaret was barely 6 months old, her father died, leaving her one of the wealthiest heirs in England. In the 15th century, this was not a gift but a burden. Wealthy orphans became wards of the crown, with marriages arranged to serve the political whims of those in power. Margaret's wardship was granted to William Deppol, a man who knew that controlling her marriage meant controlling her inheritance. The great hall of Bleo Castle, where Margaret now stands, has witnessed countless such power plays. The grey limestone walls, quarried from nearby hills, have absorbed decades of whispered secrets and heated negotiations. Tapestries of noble hunts hang between the windows, faded but still showing lords on horseback chasing deer through painted forests. Margaret understands the irony. Even at 12, she too is prey in this grand game. Suffolk's voice cuts through the air, outlining the terms of the marriage contract as if Margaret were not standing just a few feet away. "The ceremony will take place at Bleo within 2 weeks," he announces. "The girl's lands will be managed by my house until she reaches adulthood." What he doesn't say, but what everyone knows, is that this agreement ensures Suffolk's family will control Margaret's vast wealth for years to come. The rushes crackle beneath shifting feet as the men nod in agreement. The room smells of herbs and wool, the scent of sweat mixing with the sweet decay of the mint and rosemary. Even nobles in 1443 AD bathed infrequently, and the hall is filled with the odour of men who've ridden through winter mud to attend this negotiation. John Deppol shifts uncomfortably near the great fireplace, his face flickering in the firelight. His youthful uncertainty is apparent, though he tries to hide it. At 14, he is as much a pawn in this game as Margaret. Though his gender gives him the illusion of control, he will inherit his father's lands and titles. Margaret will simply transfer hers to him upon marriage, as the law demands. The wedding takes place on a cold February morning, the ground covered with a layer of frost like scattered pearls. Margaret wears a gown of royal blue silk, but the weight of the fabric feels foreign on her shoulders, and the elaborate headdress makes her feel like a child playing dress-up. The chapel at Bleo is small, its stone walls absorbing sound and light. Candles flicker in iron sconces, casting wavering shadows that make the painted saints seem to move. Margaret kneels on the stone floor, her knees already aching through the thin fabric of her dress, and repeats the Latin words that will bind her to a boy she barely knows. "I, John, take you, Margaret, as my wife," he says, his voice cracking slightly on the unfamiliar words. The echoes of his vows fill the chapel, sealing her future with his, in a way that makes her stomach churn. "I, Margaret, take you, John, as my husband," she responds, her voice steadier than her hands, though the words taste like ash in her mouth. She speaks them clearly, for she has been trained her whole life to fulfill her duty, no matter how she feels. The marriage is consummated that same night, though both children are far too young to understand the reality of what has occurred. Medieval law required the marriage to be consummated to be valid, but it also acknowledged that children couldn't truly consent. This contradiction of a marriage being both legal and harmful would define much of Margaret's early life. In the following months, Margaret begins to grasp the full weight of her situation. She lives in the Deppel household, where she is treated with the respect of her rank, but controlled as though she were valuable property. Every aspect of her life is supervised. She cannot travel without permission, nor correspond with anyone outside the household. Even her decisions about her lands and wealth are made by others. The transformation from child to political commodity is most evident during meals in the great hall. Margaret sits at the high table beside her young husband, wearing fine fabrics and elaborate headdresses, signifying her noble status. But she is not allowed to speak unless spoken to, and she watches the men around her discuss matters of state, military campaigns, and political alliances. She is acutely aware that her future rests entirely on decisions made by others. The food she eats reflects her status. She is served the finest cuts of meat and spices, yet she has no say in what or when she eats. Everything, even her diet, is controlled. During this time, Margaret displays the intelligence and determination that will one day make her one of the most powerful women in England. She listens closely to every conversation, absorbing information about political maneuvers, alliances, and power struggles. She learns to read the subtle signs of authority, understanding which lords command respect, which are fueled by fear, and which are merely ornamental figures. In 1444, news arrives that changes Margaret's life forever. John Deppol, her 14-year-old husband, has died suddenly from a fever. The official records are vague, stating only that he died at his family's estate in Suffolk. Margaret, now a 13-year-old widow, finds herself in a position that is both liberating and terrifying. Under English law, Margaret's marriage to John had never been fully consummated. Because they were both too young, the marriage wasn't considered complete. This technicality means that Margaret's inheritance remains hers. She hasn't transferred it to her late husband's family. Once again, Margaret is one of the wealthiest heirs in England, and once again, available for marriage. The news of John's death reaches Margaret as she sits in the sola, the private chamber where noble women spent their time, embroidering an altar cloth. Margaret's needle moves swiftly through the silk thread, her hands creating delicate stitches that demonstrate both her noble birth and her meticulous training in the domestic arts. The soft hum of her embroidery is interrupted when William Deppol enters the room, his face serious, yet his eyes cold and calculating. "Your husband is dead," he announces, his voice devoid of sympathy. "Fever took him in the night." Margaret's needle pauses mid-stitch, but she doesn't raise her eyes. She's learned not to show emotion in front of powerful men. Displaying vulnerability in their presence is like offering them a weapon to use against her. "I see," she replies quietly, her voice steady. She resumes her embroidery with the same calm precision, her hands steady as they move the needle through the deep gold thread, the shade of royal regalia. Each stitch she makes is not just a skill but a lesson in self-control, a virtue that Margaret has been forced to master. Suffolk watches her intently, gauging her reaction with the same careful eye a merchant uses when appraising his wares. Margaret's composure impresses him, a girl who can hear of her husband's death and show no tears as a girl who will never falter under pressure in future political negotiations. "You will stay in this household until we make new arrangements," he continues, his tone firm and final. It's clear that any arrangements will be made without consulting Margaret, who is now a mere object to be controlled, her life no longer her own. Her mourning period will last only as long as it takes Suffolk to secure another political marriage for her, no more, no less. Margaret, now a 13-year-old widow, has already been married, widowed, and is about to be sold again to further the ambitions of men who view her as little more than a bargaining chip. For the next few months, Margaret experiences a fleeting taste of freedom, though it is hardly hers to keep. She spends her days studying with tutors who teach her Latin, French, and the basics of managing her estates. These lessons aren't meant to prepare her for independence, but to make her a more valuable asset to the man who will next control her. Margaret, however, is an exceptional student. Her mind is sharp and she absorbs knowledge quickly, surprising her tutors with her intellect and hunger for learning. She masters Latin so thoroughly that she can read religious texts and legal documents in their original form. Her French, too, becomes elegant and sophisticated, marking her as a woman who could engage in the diplomacy that forms the foundation of noble marriages. But more than anything, she begins to understand the financial power behind her inheritance. The ledgers detailing Margaret's holdings reveal the staggering breadth of her wealth. She owns thousands of acres of fertile farmland, with rents that provide an immense annual income. Her estates include not only agricultural land, but also valuable resources, stone quarries, timber forests, and river rights for mills and fisheries. In terms of wealth, Margaret is one of the richest individuals in England, regardless of her gender. But with this vast fortune comes a heavy burden that Margaret is beginning to grasp. Each acre of land, every pound of income, makes her an incredibly valuable prize in the eyes of those who wish to control her. Her inheritance cannot be separated from her body. To marry Margaret is to seize control of her lands. Refuse marriage, and she risks losing everything her father left her. The harsh reality of Margaret's situation becomes apparent during a conversation with her mother, Margaret Beauchamp, who visits Bliot Castle in the spring of 1445 AD. The two women sit together in the castle's herb garden, where the first flowers of spring begin to bloom, defying the lingering chill of the air. It is one of the few moments of private conversation, away from the watchful eyes of servants and courtiers who report every word to Suffolk. Margaret Beauchamp, a woman who has survived her own political maneuverings and arranged marriages, looks at her daughter with a mix of love and resignation. "You need to understand," her mother says, her voice low and urgent, "that your inheritance is both your greatest strength and your greatest prison. The lands your father left you will provide wealth and power, but they will also ensure that you are never free to choose your own path." Margaret listens intently, her hands folded in her lap, the image of attentive obedience that has been drilled into her since childhood. But within, her mind is racing, processing the implications of her mother's words. She begins to understand that her wealth, while it gives her power in certain ways, also makes her entirely vulnerable. "What would happen if I refused to marry?" she asks, though deep down, she already knows the answer. Her mother's expression confirms her worst fears. "Your wardship would be sold to another lord. He would have the right to force you into a marriage or confiscate your lands as punishment for your disobedience." A woman's inheritance exists only as long as she remains obedient to the men who control her. Refuse marriage and you become a rebel against the natural order. Rebels lose everything. The conversation, which takes place beside the bed of lavender, rosemary and thyme, leaves an indelible mark on Margaret's mind. The flowers, symbols of domesticity and feminine virtue, now also represent the narrow, confining roles that noble women are expected to play. Beautiful, fragrant, yet entirely contained. As the seasons pass, Margaret receives word of her next marriage arrangement. In the summer of 1445 AD, influenced by his advisors and political needs, King Henry VI grants her wardship to Edmund Tudor, the Earl of Richmond. The political ramifications of Margaret's second marriage are far-reaching. Not only does it strengthen the Tudor family's position at court, but it also guarantees Edmund's access to Margaret's vast wealth, further cementing an alliance between the Lancasters and the Tudors, an alliance that will play a pivotal role in the Wars of the Roses. Edmund Tudor, at 24, is a decade older than Margaret, and though he is the son of Owen Tudor and Catherine of Valois, widow of King Henry V, he is more than just a royal connection. Edmund is accustomed to getting what he desires, and in this case he is determined to claim both Margaret and her inheritance. Negotiations for the marriage take place in the autumn of 1445 AD at Westminster Palace. Margaret, now 14, is old enough to understand the political implications of the marriage, but still too young to refuse legally. Accompanied by a small retinue of guards and attendants, she travels to Westminster, where she will be married off for the benefit of men who view her as an asset rather than a person. Westminster Palace in 1445 is an imposing structure, with its sprawling wings serving as both a royal residence and a seat of government. The Great Hall, where Margaret's marriage contract is to be finalised, is one of the largest rooms in all of Europe. The ceiling stretches far above, lost in shadow, while the floor is covered in rushes that rustle beneath the footsteps of those moving about. The vastness of the hall amplifies every sound, making private conversations impossible. Margaret stands beside a pillar adorned with intricate carvings, her eyes trained on the men who will decide her future. Edmund Tudor stands tall, his broad shoulders and confident demeanour projecting authority. He speaks easily with the king's advisers, discussing Margaret's inheritance as if she were no more than an object to be claimed. The lands she owns will provide a substantial income, Edmund asserts, his voice resonating through the hall. Properly managed, her estates will support our position at court and fund our military obligations. He glances at Margaret briefly, assessing her like a horse being appraised for purchase. She is young, healthy, and most importantly, wealthy. Everything a nobleman could ask for in a wife. King Henry VI, who is barely 24 himself, and showing early signs of the instability that will eventually lead to civil war, nods his approval of the marriage. The king's endorsement is vital. It transforms the marriage from a simple arrangement to a royal command. Margaret cannot refuse without risking treason against the crown. The wedding ceremony occurs in early 1446 at Bliot Castle, when Margaret is 14 years old. This marriage is more elaborate than her first, a reflection of Edmund's higher status and the significant political weight this union carries. Margaret dons cloth of gold, the finest fabric available, and a circlet of precious stones signifying her new rank as Countess of Richmond. The ceremony itself is a combination of religious solemnity and political spectacle, with the Bishop of Winchester officiating, lending the full authority of the church to the proceedings. Noble witnesses fill the chapel, their presence ensuring the legitimacy of the marriage. Margaret speaks her vows clearly, maintaining the composed demeanour that she has carefully cultivated over the years. Any sign of reluctance or emotion would only invite doubts about her suitability as a wife. Edmund Tudor's vows are possessive, full of confidence, as he places the heavy gold ring with a large sapphire on her finger. It serves as a reminder of the power dynamics that will define their marriage. The weight of the ring feels burdensome to Margaret's small hand, a constant symbol of her surrender of independence. The consummation of the marriage occurs that same night, and there is no question of either participant being too young. But by medieval standards, Margaret, at 14, is considered an adult, and Edmund is an experienced man who knows exactly what he is claiming. The event is quick, but it serves to solidify Edmund's legal and physical dominance over his new wife. In the days and months that follow, Margaret's transition into married life with Edmund reveals the harsh realities of being a noblewoman in 15th century England. Though she now holds the title of Countess of Richmond, granting her social prominence, she has no actual power. Every aspect of her life, her decisions, her property, her future, is controlled by Edmund, who exercises his authority with ease and confidence. Their household, established at Callacott Castle in Wales, reflects Edmund's military background and political ambitions. The castle, a fortress designed for defence rather than comfort, shapes Margaret's daily routine. She lives to serve Edmund's needs, her own desires taking a backseat to his. Edmund's management of Margaret's inheritance is a display of his political shrewdness and his complete disregard for her as an individual. He quickly reorganises her estates, installing his own men as stewards, ensuring that the income from Margaret's lands flows directly into his military campaigns and political ventures, all while disregarding her concerns. Margaret watches these changes with growing awareness of her situation. Though she is immensely wealthy, her wealth is not her own. It exists to serve Edmund's ambitions. Margaret is learning that, as a noble woman, she is nothing more than valuable property, a woman with no agency, only wealth and title to be controlled by men. The political landscape in England is increasingly unstable, with tensions growing between various factions of the nobility. Edmund's loyalty to the Lancastrian cause puts him and Margaret in jeopardy as opposition to King Henry VI's rule continues to gain strength. Margaret finds herself caught in a political web that she did not weave and cannot escape. In late 1456, as the political climate in England reaches a boiling point, Margaret discovers that she is pregnant. The news brings a mixture of joy and fear. Joy because bearing an heir is her primary duty as a wife, but fear because, at 14, she understands the physical risks that childbirth poses for someone her age. The dangers of pregnancy in medieval times, with its limited and often harmful medical knowledge, make every pregnancy a gamble with death. Margaret's pregnancy progresses throughout the winter of 1456 into 1457, a time when political tensions in England are nearing a breaking point. Edmund, embroiled in military campaigns, is often away from home, leaving Margaret to face the hardships of pregnancy largely alone, attended only by servants and midwives. The political situation grows even more precarious when Edmund is captured by Yorkist forces in August of 1456. Margaret is left in a perilous position after Edmund's death in November 1456. Pregnant and widowed, she possesses great wealth but has no male protector to defend her. The child she carries could be a son, who would inherit Edmund's titles and her lands, or a daughter, who would likely face the same fate Margaret has endured. Regardless, the child will be born into a world where political turmoil and arranged marriages are commonplace. Margaret, who is now about 7 months pregnant, receives the devastating news of Edmund's death, while grappling with the physical and emotional strain of her advanced pregnancy. The news weighs heavily on her, but Margaret understands that emotions have no place in the political game. She is both valuable and vulnerable, and her wealth makes her a target for those eager to seize it. On January 28, 1457, Margaret goes into labour at Pembroke Castle in Wales, at the tender age of 13. The birth is difficult, as it often is for someone her age. Medieval childbirth is fraught with danger, with midwives relying more on traditional methods and herbal remedies than actual medical knowledge. The mortality rate for both mothers and infants is frighteningly high, and Margaret endures hours of agonizing pain. Her small frame makes the process even more dangerous, and there are moments when it seems that both she and the child may not survive. But despite the odds, the baby that emerges from this ordeal is a healthy boy, strong and alive. Margaret names him Henry, after the king, as a clear political gesture that aligns her loyalty with the Lancastrian cause. This child, born under such dire circumstances, will grow to become Henry VIII, the first Tudor king of England. But for now, he is simply a newborn, dependent on his 13-year-old mother to navigate the treacherous world of medieval politics. Margaret's recovery from childbirth is slow and arduous. The medical care available to new mothers in medieval times is minimal, and the trauma of giving birth so young leaves her weakened. Though it is uncertain whether her inability to have more children is due to complications from Henry's birth or other reasons, it's clear that her health has been irreparably affected. The experience of pregnancy and childbirth at 13 has lasting effects, both physically and mentally, on Margaret. The first few months of Henry's life are filled with uncertainty. Margaret is a widow with an infant son, surrounded by enemies eager to claim her inheritance. She must find a way to protect herself and her child while navigating the complex network of alliances and rivalries that define noble society. In order to safeguard her future and her son's, Margaret seeks a new marriage, one that will provide the protection both of them desperately need. This time, Margaret takes a more active role in the negotiations. She sets her sights on Sir Henry Stafford, the younger son of the Duke of Buckingham. Henry Stafford is around 30 years old, making him significantly older than Margaret, but still not old enough to be her grandfather. He is an experienced soldier and courtier, well versed in the political realities of the time. More importantly, he is willing to protect Margaret's son and respect her role as Henry's mother, something that was rare in 15th century marriages. Their marriage takes place in 1458 AD, when Margaret is 15. This ceremony is smaller and more private than her previous weddings, reflecting both the changing political climate and Margaret's evolving circumstances. She is no longer a young virgin traded for political gain, but a widow with a child seeking stability and protection. Her marriage to Henry Stafford proves to be her most stable and supportive. Stafford treats her with genuine respect and affection, allowing her to develop intellectually and begin engaging in political matters. Under his protection, Margaret begins to emerge as a political figure in her own right, no longer just a pawn in the hands of powerful men. During their marriage from 1458 to 1471 AD, Margaret experiences a period of relative stability in her personal life. As England descends further into the chaos of the Wars of the Roses, Margaret uses this time to hone her political acumen. She builds alliances and supports the Lancastrian cause, using her wealth and influence to advance the faction she believes will secure her son's future. Through these years, Margaret learns the ins and outs of medieval power dynamics. She begins to understand how to read the subtle signs of shifting alliances, the economic forces driving political decisions, and the personal motivations behind public actions. Most importantly, she learns to use her social position and wealth to shape events, rather than merely react to them. However, in 1471, the death of Henry Stafford marks the end of this period of stability. At 28 years old, Margaret is now seasoned in the ways of politics and court life. She is determined to ensure her son's future, no matter the challenges in her way. Margaret's fourth and final marriage comes in 1472 to Thomas Stanley, Earl of Derby. Stanley, a man of political flexibility and survival instincts, is the ideal partner for Margaret. He has managed to maintain his position throughout the various regime changes and is well suited to help Margaret with her political ambitions. Their marriage is founded on mutual respect and shared political goals. With Stanley's protection, Margaret is able to act more openly as a political figure. She builds relationships with other noble families, provides financial support for causes she believes in, and positions herself as a potential kingmaker. Though her son Henry is still in exile, Margaret is laying the groundwork for his eventual return to England. The 1470s and 1480s are a time of intense political manoeuvring for Margaret as she navigates the complex world of Yorkist rule under Edward I and later Richard III. She works tirelessly to advance her son's cause while always being mindful of the shifting political tides. Her survival and success during this period demonstrate the immense political skills Margaret has developed since her early years, when she was a powerless pawn in the hands of men. As the Wars of the Roses rage on, Margaret's ability to manipulate political situations and her determination to secure her son's throne will ultimately shape the course of English history. Margaret's decision to support Henry's invasion of England in 1485 marks the pinnacle of her political journey, a journey that has spanned decades and come at the cost of her personal happiness. The Battle of Bosworth Field in August 1485 stands as the defining moment when her years of sacrifice finally pay off. Henry Tudor's victory over Richard III not only secures his crown, but also transforms Margaret from a political strategist into the mother of England's monarch. At 52, she holds a level of influence and power that would have been unimaginable when she was first married off at just 12. Now, as the king's mother, Margaret commands unprecedented authority for a woman of her time. She is given the title My Lady the King's Mother, and with it, the power to influence royal appointments, policy decisions, and marriages. She has successfully transformed her inherited wealth and painful life experiences into a source of political leverage. Yet, the irony of Margaret's triumph is that it comes at the expense of her own fulfillment. Her entire adult life has been a battle for her son's future, a battle that has meant sacrificing her own desires and opportunities. She has gained everything she set out to achieve, but in doing so she has lost the possibility of personal happiness. The years that follow are a mix of victory and loss. Margaret witnesses her son's establishment of the Tudor dynasty and the securing of the throne for his descendants. However, she also faces the heartache of outliving many of her peers and watching the political world she helped create evolve beyond her control. She dies in 1509, shortly after her son, having lived long enough to see her grandson, Henry VIII, begin his reign. Margaret's legacy extends well beyond her own family. She is remembered as one of the most powerful women in English history, a figure who turned personal suffering into political power. Her story speaks to the limitations imposed on women in medieval society, and the remarkable individuals who were able to transcend those limitations through intelligence, determination, and strategic thinking. Through her son Henry VIII, Margaret is the ancestor of all the subsequent Tudor monarchs, including the legendary Elizabeth I. Her political ingenuity and strategic vision helped lay the foundation for one of England's most enduring dynasties. Her life is a powerful reminder that even in societies that severely restricted women's opportunities, personal resolve and intellect could break through seemingly insurmountable barriers. Margaret's transformation from a powerless child bride to one of the most influential women in English history is a testament to the human spirit's capacity to adapt and overcome. As she grew older, Margaret's religious devotion became another key aspect of her character. She became deeply involved in religious activities, founding schools and supporting various religious institutions. It's likely that her religious focus was both a reflection of genuine faith and a way to atone for the political compromises she had made throughout her life. But her spiritual engagement was also a strategic move, an opportunity to bolster her reputation and create another avenue for influence. Margaret's complex character is most clearly demonstrated in her relationship with her son, Henry VIII. She loves him deeply and has sacrificed so much to see him succeed, but she also views him as the culmination of her political ambitions. Their bond is both affectionate and strategically motivated, a mix of personal love and political calculation, showing how often, in the lives of medieval nobility, personal feelings and political motives are intertwined. Her life also offers a glimpse into the broader social and political world of 15th century England. It highlights the instability and violence of the Wars of the Roses, the crucial role of marriage and political alliances, and the surprising ways in which women could wield power despite the many legal and societal restrictions placed upon them. Her experiences give us a unique window into a world where survival often required a sharp mind and the ability to outmaneuver rivals. The historical record on Margaret is rich, providing historians with deep insights into her motivations and actions. Her letters, financial records, and accounts from those who lived during her time paint a vivid picture of a woman who was shaped by her circumstances, but who also shaped those circumstances to her benefit. This wealth of documentation showcases not just her political acumen, but also her personal struggles and triumphs. Margaret's later years also reveal her interest in supporting education and religious causes. Using her wealth and influence, she founded schools and supported religious endeavors, perhaps seeking to leave behind a legacy beyond her political achievements. Her efforts in education reflect both her own intellectual interests and a recognition of the importance of learning in maintaining political and social influence. Margaret's personal experiences and political activities are deeply connected, with her early childhood marriages and widowhood providing the lessons that would later fuel her success. The painful realities of her early life, her arranged marriages, her widowhood, and her eventual political maneuvering became the foundation for her later triumphs. These formative experiences taught her about power and the necessity of strategic thinking in a world where women had little control over their own lives. At the same time, Margaret's story raises important questions about the nature of power and agency in a society that restricted women's opportunities. While she achieved remarkable success, it was a success born of a system that systematically denied her freedom. Her triumph is both a victory over oppression and an accommodation to it, illustrating the complex negotiation between survival and submission that so often define the lives of women in hierarchical societies. One of the most intriguing aspects of Margaret's character is her psychological depth. She is resilient and determined, but also willing to sacrifice her own happiness for the sake of her political ambitions. Her emotional life remains largely hidden from the historical record, but her actions suggest a profound love for her son, coupled with an unyielding drive to secure his future. Margaret's relationships with other women of her time provide another lens through which to view her character. Living in a male-dominated world, Margaret found ways to build networks of mutual support with other noble women. These relationships were not just personal, they also offered political opportunities, showing how women, despite being marginalized, could create powerful networks to navigate the political landscape. The economic impact of Margaret's story is just as significant as her political maneuvering. Her inherited wealth not only gave her a solid foundation for her influence, but also showcased her exceptional ability to manage financial resources. Margaret knew exactly how to leverage her wealth, proving her keen intellect and deep understanding of how economic power translates into political leverage. Her story remains relevant in contemporary discussions about women's roles in politics and society. It highlights the barriers women face in male-dominated structures, yet also showcases how exceptional individuals can defy these limitations through sharp strategy, resilience, and determination. Margaret's legacy serves as an inspiration for women navigating similar challenges, no matter the era. In her later years, Margaret became deeply involved in religious and charitable activities, marking yet another layer of her complex character. Her growing devotion to religious causes may have been an attempt to seek spiritual peace, possibly even as a form of atonement for the political decisions she had made over the years. Yet, Her religious activities also had a more strategic side, allowing her to further cement her legacy and enhance her influence. Margaret's contributions to the development of the English monarchy go far beyond her immediate family. Her political savvy and strategic insights laid the groundwork for royal authority and the organisation of the English court, leaving a lasting mark on English governance for generations. Margaret's actions demonstrate how individual decisions can reverberate through history, altering the course of a nation. Yet, the tragedy of her story lies in the personal sacrifices she made for her political success. Margaret amassed immense power and influence, but this came at the expense of her own happiness. Her life is a stark reminder of the difficult choices women had to make in societies that offered limited opportunities for self-determination and personal fulfillment. In her final years, Margaret experienced a blend of triumph and isolation. Though she had achieved her life's goal, securing her son's throne, she outlived many of her contemporaries, leaving her distance from the political world she helped shape. Her death in 1509 marks the end of an era, but it also signals the beginning of a new phase in English history. The legacy of Margaret Bowitt serves as a poignant reminder of the complex relationship between personal agency and societal constraints. Even in systems that severely restricted women's opportunities, exceptional individuals like Margaret found ways to wield influence and achieve their goals. Her life is both inspiring and sobering, illustrating the potential and the cost of ambition in a world where women had few chances for autonomy. Today, Margaret Bowitt lies buried beneath a monument in Westminster Abbey, where the bronze effigy depicting her in noble robes, hands folded in prayer, presents a serene image of her death. Yet, this monument cannot capture the burning determination that fueled her life. It cannot show the fire that transformed her from a powerless child bride into one of the most influential women in English history. The girl who was married at 12, pregnant at 13, and silenced by men who decided her future, became the mother of kings, the founder of a dynasty, and the architect of her own extraordinary fate. Margaret learned to play the game of power alongside those who thought they owned her, and in the end she played them so skillfully that she became the one in control. In a world where women were expected to be passive and obedient, Margaret Bowitt found her voice and used it to alter the course of history. Her legacy endures, echoing through time, as a powerful reminder that even those who seem the most powerless can seize control of their destiny. The girl once broken by her circumstances rebuilt herself as a woman of steel, turning her pain into purpose and transforming her trauma into triumph. From a 12-year-old who stood silently while men dictated her life, Margaret Bowitt became the woman who shaped the future of England itself.